This is where I will now sell you on the New York Mets being in the best position of these three teams, because they're not really committed to most of the guys that could be dangled. The toughest one to talk about selling is Pete Alonso. But another article I think I'm actually be writing this week here is, were the New York Mets built to sell this year? Because they signed a bunch of guys on one-year deals, and you're looking at what they could do at this deadline. And I guess I'm turning into a prospect hugger. I'm getting excited because Luis Severino, I mean, there's a chance this guy is the best rental pitcher available at this year's deadline. He has looked fantastic so far. They're keeping a 6-man rotation, so he's throwing once a week. Probably keep him fresh until the deadline, potentially make him look as attractive as possible. You have Sean Manaea, similar boat, not quite the performance, but you could get something there. You have JD Martinez signed to a contract that has a bunch of deferred money. It only costs $2.5 million this year. So for any team that wants a just right-handed proven run producer on a cheap contract, the Mets could ship him out. And I think they're in a position where if they have a miraculous run before this deadline and they get into the race, they're fine to keep them. But if not, I mean, they're going to have a ton to sell. And that window that Max Scherzer was talking about, 25, 26, that might have actually been the exact vision for the Mets.
The Mets have 13 players that are going to be free agents next year. 14 if you count Jake Diekman, who needs a certain qualifier, right, to come back on the mutual option. And then Sean Manaea is the only one that's going to be a free agent after 2025. So he's probably in that mix. That's 15 guys that you could look and play around with and dangle as these trade chips. So yeah, they've got their core guys. They got the Nimos and McNeil's. Yes, Jeff McNeil is kind of a core player for the Mets right now. Lindor, Kodai Senga. But other than that, who are those players? They've got some of the young ones that are in the system. We're seeing Brett Beatty now kind of start to make his Mets memories and things of that nature. But look, yeah, they're going to be able to trade off and then save some money too on the back end, right? Where they can save that money and potentially towards next year's. You can only save so much when you're paying the Texas Rangers and Houston Astros, right, for Scherzer and Verlander.
Here's the interesting part about it. I think Steve Cohen loves what they did at the deadline last year. I think if the Mets were to go into sell mode again, he would once again try to use his money to get better prospect returns. So I can even see, like, you're looking at Starling Marte and you're saying right now he's been about a league average player, not too great. But if there's a team, I don't know if they'd send him to the Braves, but let's just say a team in desperate need of a corner outfielder, and yes, he's got 2 years left, but the Mets made it a super palatable contract where they eat, I think he's making like 19 a season. If they ate the remainder of his contract in like 15 million of the contract next year, all of a sudden that's a piece that can be moved. Jeff McNeil, similar boat where it's a couple years after this year, I think maybe 2 years after. That one I think would be a little bit harder to swallow, but the point is the Mets can eat down these contracts. Even Severino, like, he's pitched great, and I think any team would be willing to pay his $13 million, the prorated amount of it. But if you got an extra prospect for throwing whatever the millions of dollars into it, and you can send it to a team that might be up against, like if you send them to the Padres, for example, and they're pinching pennies, like that's the mode the Mets are in right now. It is a lot of a whole new type of money ball, and it's not saving, it's spending. I think the Mets are almost in a position where no one would want to tell you it, but I think they're very comfortable being sellers again. And right now they're letting this team play it out and see what happens. But I think there's a very strong possibility they're the most aggressive seller again.
How about billionaire ball?
Billionaire ball, yeah.
Is that the way? Because look, a money ball was about finding value where other teams didn't in order to save money. Whereas the Mets are using money as an asset. And look, if they're able to do that, so be it. So Uncle Steve is like you said, paying down these deals to get better players. And it certainly worked out really well with Luis Angel Acuna, the one Acuna that will be playing in the NL East somewhere, even if it is in the minors right now. So yeah, you're right. Like, that is an asset that they can totally utilize to buy down these contracts and then still bring in more contracts next year. It's amazing how some like small market teams don't try to utilize a strategy like that in a sense. Cause I've seen the Dodgers do that in the past where, when they acquired Homer Bailey, basically saying, hey, we'll take this bad contract from the Reds. And then they end up getting, I think it was Josiah Gray and Jeter Downs from the
Yeah.
Reds in that deal. And then they turn around, trade Jeter Downs in the deal that gets the Mookie Betts. And Josiah Gray goes over to the Nationals for Trey Turner and Max Scherzer. So like you can utilize money as an asset in that way. And for smaller teams, if they want to go ahead and take a bad contract, they might get a better prospect. In the case of the Mets, they give a bad contract, but then they pay even more of it down. Now they are going to be the ones who benefit from that prospect. And like Max said, 25, 26, 27 really becomes where the Mets are eyeing true contention rather than 24.
It's a very NBA philosophy because we see it happen in the NBA all the time. These expiring contracts, the bad teams take them on, or teams who are trying to get an expiring contract to free up money for free agency. Money's played with a lot more in that sport, but we're starting to see it be a little bit more in vogue in baseball. To see the Marlins eat money on Luis Ariz to get better prospects, that was pretty surprising. But it shows you where we might be moving here. Where if a team has a payroll that they're comfortable with, and they're in a seller position, and there's another team that's pushing up against those really dangerous luxury tax thresholds, that's where you can find some value. It's funny you mentioned Moneyball was finding value where other teams didn't. I think the Mets are finding value where other teams can't, because most teams can't swallow this amount of money. The Mets, clearly with Steve Cohen, can.